File permissions in Linux. File permissions in Linux. We discussed that Linux is one of the free and open source operating system available in the market. Linux is community based OS. Multiple users can access Linux machines at a time. Linux is multi-user based operating system. Linux is multi-user based operating system. I mean to say, when we are creating one virtual machine in the AWS cloud. So this is our AWS cloud account. AWS cloud account. In this AWS cloud, we are launching one virtual machine that is called as EC2 VM. By using EC2 service, we are creating one virtual machine, EC2 VM with the Linux operating system. Now, in our team, multiple members are available. Assume that in our team, there are 3 DevOps engineers are available. Now, all those DevOps engineers want to connect with this Linux machine. So there are multiple DevOps engineers are available. Those DevOps engineers want to connect with the same Linux machine to perform some operations. So one person is working on the deployment of our application. Another person is working on some Jenkins software. There are several softwares available in this Linux VM. One person is working with logs which are created in our application, and another person is working with OS patching updates. Another person is working with some other softwares available in the Linux machine. So is engineer 1, DevOps engineer 1 and engineer 2, engineer 2, engineer 3. 3 people belongs to same team. They are connected to same machine at a time. Can multiple users access the Linux machine at a time? Is it possible? Can 3 people connect to the same Linux machine at a time? Yes or no? 3 people can connect to the same Linux machine at a time because Linux is multi-user based operating system. Multiple users can access our Linux machine at a time. Okay, when multiple people are accessing our machine at a time, what about files and directories that we have? Who can access which file? Who can modify which file? We need to manage some permissions for the files available in our Linux machine. So here, 2 people are experienced people and 1 person is a fresher. For fresher, I don't want to give the permission to modify the data available in the files because for our application some configuration files are available. I don't want to give the right permission for the fresher for that configuration file which is using by our application. For experienced people, I want to give read permission, write permission. For fresher, I want to give only read permission. So how to manage those permissions in Linux operating system? That is our today's topic. Are you guys able to understand why we need to discuss file permissions in the Linux? In the Linux operating system, everything will be represented as a file only. A directory is also a file. A normal file is also a file. Everything will be represented as a file in the Linux operating system. And Linux is multi-user based operating system. Multiple users can access the Linux machine at a time by using that public IP and key pair. So if the key pair and public IP we have, we can also connect to that Linux machine. So there are some important files I kept in my Linux virtual machine. Now, do you want everybody to read the data and write the data? Do you want everybody to read the data and write the data to the files? Do we need to protect our files? Do we need to protect our files? We need to protect our files because some people are experienced people, some people are freshers. Okay, now here when we are working with file permissions in the Linux, there are 3 types of permissions will be available. File permissions. There are 3 types of file permissions will be available. One is read permission, and the second one is write permission, and the third one is execute permission. So a file can have 3 permissions: read, write, execute. Read permission will be represented by using small r. Write permission will be represented by using small w. Execute permission will be represented by using small x. So these are three permissions that we can apply for a file in the Linux. So what is the meaning of read? You can read the data available in the file. What is the write permission? You can modify the file data. What is execute? If that file is something like a shell script file, .sh file, for example, I have downloaded some software. I want to execute it. Okay, so if you want to execute such kind of a shell script file, you need to have a execute permission. In the Windows, we are downloading .exe files and we are going to execute. In the Linux, we are going to use .sh file, we are going to execute. So if you want to install any software or if you want to execute any shell script file, so you need to have execute permission on that file. If you want to modify the data of your file, you need to have write permission. If you want to read the data from the file, you need to have read permission. So file permissions are three: read permission, write permission, execute permission. These file permissions will be represented by using these alphabets. R means read, W means write, X means execute. Okay, now how to manage the permissions for the files and directories in the Linux operating system. I'm using a Linux machine in the AWS cloud. I created one virtual machine. We can connect to that virtual machine using public IP address with the help of SSH client. I am using Mobile Extram as a SSH client. Let's go to session, remote host, public IP address, username, default username is EC2 user. Use the private key. We used Linux PEM file. Click on OK. I'm able to connect with my Linux machine. Okay, so we practiced several commands: pwd, who am I, ls command, cat command, cp command, touch command, head command, tail command, grep command, vi command, sed command, like that. Now let us understand how to work with the permissions for the files and directories in the Linux OS. So these permissions are used to manage our files, to protect our files from unwanted accesses. Right. First, before going to work with the permissions, first understand what are the files available and what are the permissions available for those files. Can you tell me the command which is used to display the content of present working directory? Can you tell me the command which is used to display the content of present working directory? Cat command. What is the purpose of cat? pwd will display present working directory, not the content of the present working directory. I want to display content of the present working directory. What is the command? ls-l command. ls-l command we are using to display content of our present working directory. Already we have several files. Here. Got it? Now, if you see the starting of the file, there is a hyphen and there is a D. If there is a hyphen, that means it is a normal file. If there is a D, that means it is a directory file. So whenever you use ls-l, can you differentiate which one is a normal file and which one is a directory file? Can you differentiate which one is a normal file and which one is a directory file? Yes. If the file is starting with the character D, then that is called as directory. Okay. If the file is starting with a hyphen, then that is normal file. And the normal files are displaying in the white color. Directories are displaying in the blue color. Normal files are displaying in the white color font. Directory files are displaying in the blue color font. Directory file starting with the character D, normal file starting with the character hyphen. Okay, now ignore the first character. We know what is the purpose of first character when we use ls-l. First character will represent type of the file. After that, we have rw hyphen. For every file, we we have this RW hyphen, RW hyphen, R double hyphen, RWX, RWX, R hyphen X. There are some characters are available. These characters will represent existing permissions for the file. When we create a file, by default, some permissions are coming for the file. File permission is divided into three parts. File permissions are three types, and a file permission is divided into three parts. First part, it contains user permission. Second part, it contains group permission. Third part, it contains others permission. User, group, others. User permission, group permission, others permission. So here a file permission is divided into three sections. Section 1, section 2, section 3. Section 1 will be available, section 2 will be available, and section 3 will be available. Section 1, section 2, section 3. So three parts will be available in the file permission. What are those three parts? First section will represent the user permissions on the file. That means which user created that file, that user permissions will be represented as part of section. User permissions. What permissions the user is having on that file, it will be represented by section 1. Section 2 represents the group permission. We can create a group. In that group we are going to add the users, right? User permission is the first section, group permissions is the second section, and the third one is others permission. Others means other user accounts which are available in the Linux VM. Linux is a multi-user operating system. Multiple accounts we can create. In the Linux machine. After file permissions completed, I will tell you how to work with the user management in the Linux. How to create a user account, how to provide the permission for that user, how to add the user to the group, how to remove the user from the group, what is a sudoers file in the Linux. Those are upcoming topics. Right. So today we are talking about file permission. A file can have read permission, write permission, execute. But that file permissions are divided into three sections. Section 1 represents users, the owner, permissions of that file. So who created that file, what permissions that owner is having, that is user permission. Section 2, group permission. So we can create a group, we can add the users to a group, we can give the permissions to a group also. Next one, section 3. Section 3 represents other user permissions on that file. Okay, if you take existing permissions on this file ashokit.txt, there is a file available. If you take the first character, I am not taking, guys. First character represents type of the file. I don't need that. From this I am taking the permission. Now here if you see RW hyphen, first three characters will represent user permissions. Next three characters will represent group permissions. Next three characters will represent others permission. Are you guys able to understand the three sections we have for the file permissions? Read permission, write permission, hyphen is there. This is section 1. So a file will have permissions in three sections. First three characters represents user permissions on that file. Next three characters represents group permissions on that file. The next three characters will represent other permissions on that file. Read, write, execute, these are the three types. Those three types will be divided into three sections. First section, user. Second section, group. Third section, others permission. Now what permissions user is having? User is having read, write, hyphen. That means there is no execute permission for the user. User can read the data from that file, user can write the data to that file. Read permission is there, write permission is there. Instead of execute, hyphen is there. Hyphen means execute is not available. First one represents read, second one represents write, third one represents execute. If you go to next three characters, RW hyphen, that means group can read the data, can write the data, but there is no execute. But when you go for section 3, others permissions available. For others, what permissions are there? R double hyphen. That means others are having only read permission. Other users cannot modify the data, cannot execute that file. If it is a shell script, they cannot execute it. Are you able to understand the permissions which are already available for the file now? First three characters represents user permissions. Read, write, execute. For example, if I write a file permission like this, RWX, RWX, RWX. What is the meaning of that? These first three characters represents user permissions on the file. These three characters will represent group permissions on the file. These three characters will represent other permissions on the file. User having RWX. That means user is having read permission, write permission, execute permission. Others are having read, write, execute, RWX. Group is also having RWX, others also having RWX. Everybody having every permission on the file when you use RWX, RWX, RWX. For example, if I remove this W, suppose for example if I am writing like this, RWX, RWX, R-X. What is the meaning of this? RWX, RWX, R-X. What is the meaning of this? Who is having which permission? Can you tell me now? Who is having which permission? Can you tell me now? Who is having which permission? Can you tell me now? User is having read, write, execute. User is having read, write, execute. Group is having read, write, execute. Others are having only read and execute. They don't have a write permission. Now you understand how to understand the permissions of the file. Now you understand the file permissions, existing permissions. Okay, so a file can have three permissions. A file can have three permissions. What are those three permissions? One is read permission, it will be represented as a R. Second one is write permission, represented as a W. Third one is execute permission, will represent as a X. Read, write and execute, three permissions will be available. File permissions are divided into three sections. File permissions are divided into three sections. What are those three sections? Section 1 represents user permissions. User permissions. First three characters represents user permissions. User permissions. Section 2, character 4 to character 5. Section 2 represents group permissions. Group permissions. Characters from 4th to 6th character, 4, 5, 6. From 4th to 6th characters represents group permissions. Understood? Now we are going to use section 3. Section 3. Section 3 represents others permission. Others permissions. From 7th to 9th character. From 7th to 9th character represents others permissions. Are you guys clear with my point? User permissions, group permissions, others permissions. Read, write and execute. A file can have three types of permissions. Read, write and execute. The file permissions are divided into three sections. Section 1 represents user permissions. Section 2 represents group permissions. Section 3 represents others permissions. For example, if I give a permission like this, RWX, RWX, RWX. What is the meaning of this? What is the meaning of this? RWX, RWX, RWX. What is the meaning? of this, guys? RWX, RWX, RWX. What is the meaning of this? Who is having which permission? Who is having this? Come on. User is having. User having. Read, write, and execute permission. Okay. Group is having. Group is having. Read, write, and execute permissions. Execute permissions are available. Okay. Next one. Others. Others also having what permission? Read, write, and execute permissions available for others. So, are you able to interpret the file permissions based on these characters? Are you able to interpret file permissions based on these characters? Very good. Next, suppose if a file is having permission like this, R, W hyphen, R, W hyphen, R hyphen hyphen. Now can you tell me who is having which permission based on this? R, W hyphen, R, W hyphen, R double hyphen. Come on. What permissions are available for the user now? You need to identify. What permissions are available for the group? You need to identify. What permissions available for others? You need to identify. Come on. Based on the characters, you need to find out who is having which permissions. User is having read and write. Group is also having read and write. Others only read. Others are having only read permission. Is this clear? Is this clear? RW hyphen, user is having read and write. Group RW hyphen, only read and write. R double hyphen, others are having only read permission. Okay, now I will write one more pattern. R hyphen hyphen, R hyphen hyphen, R hyphen hyphen, R hyphen X. Now tell me who is having which permission. R double hyphen, R double hyphen, R hyphen X. Write a single message for everything and send me. Write a single message for everything and send me. Here, user having only read permission. User is having only read permission. Group also having only read permission. Others are having read and execute. Others are having read and execute permissions. Is it clear? Is it clear? R double hyphen, first three, user is having only read. R double hyphen, group is having only read. R hyphen X, only read and execute available. Nobody is having write permission on the file. Is there anybody having a write permission on the file? Is there anybody who is having a write permission on the file? Nobody is having write permission on the file. Nobody is having write permission on the file. Is this clear? Is this clear? Right. So some people may not understand what is execute. What is the meaning of execute? Installing a software, running a program. Installing a software. Now, how you will install a software? Suppose you want to install a software. You will download a exe file and you will run that, right? Simple example. Tomorrow in the DevOps, we are going to use Git. So what I will do to work with Git? Download Git. Downloads. I will go here. I will download Git for Windows. 64-bit for Windows. What happened now? I downloaded a .exe file. If I want to install this Git, what should I do? Should I install this software By using .exe? Yes. How to do this? I will double click on this file. Then what is happening? It is executing. This is called execute permission. So if you are running a software, if you are running a .exe file, that means you are executing a software. Okay. Understand my point? What is execute? So in the Windows, you are downloading a file, you are double clicking on that and you are executing. You are able to install it. That means you have a execute permission. You are able to install the .exe file. Similarly, in the Windows, how we will install a software? Shell script files will be available. SH files will be available. So if you want to run the SH file, you need to have a execute permission. In the shell script, we are going to understand that. In the shell script, we are going to write the SH files. If I want to run the SH file, I need to have a execute permission. If I want to work with that, I need to use the execute permission. Are you guys able to understand? Very good. Now, let me give another pattern. Identify. Suppose, now I am giving a different pattern. R, X, R, X, hyphen X. Now can you tell me, who is having which permissions on this pattern? I want you to tell me who is having which permissions on this pattern. Who is having which permissions on this pattern? People are confusing with the iPhones. Observe carefully. It is a tricky. It is a trap. It is a trap. Observe properly. Observe properly. It is a trap question. Still people are giving wrong answers. Still people are giving the wrong answer. Now here, it is a normal file, guys. It is a normal file. First character, do we need to consider? Do we need to consider the first character? No. So what permissions the user is having? User is having read and execute. What permission the group is having? What permission the group is having? Group is having read and execute. Okay. What permission others are having? Others are having only execute. So you should not consider the first character. First character represents the type of the file. First character represents the type of the file. Got my point? Okay. Now I will give one more pattern. D W hyphen 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 X. Yeah. Now tell me. It is a normal file or it is a directory file? It is a directory file. So do you need to consider the first character? No. Now tell me, who is having which permissions on this file? What permissions that user is having? What permission group is having? And what permission others are having? What permission others are having? User is having only permission. No permission. They can't read, they can't write, they can't execute. There is no permission for others. So I hope you understood file permissions now. In the Linux is a multi-user operating system. Multiple users can talk to single Linux machine at a time. So when multiple users are connecting to the same Linux machine, we need to protect our files for unwanted modifications. Okay, so for that we are going to manage those permissions here. We are going to manage those permissions here. For that we are going to use read, write, execute. Every file will have three permissions: read, write and execute permissions. So the file permissions are divided into three sections here. File permissions are divided into three sections here. User permissions are available, and group permissions are available, and execute permissions are available. Execute permissions are available. Good. So we are able to understand the existing permissions. Now guys, take a screenshot. Take a screenshot in your mobile. Read, write, execute three sections: user permissions, group permissions and other permissions. Take a screenshot of this image. Take a screenshot of this image. Okay. Now next thing is how to change the permissions. We are able to understand the patterns. So if you see any file now, you can understand what permissions that file is having. But now how to modify those permissions, how to add a permission, how to remove a permission. So modifying file permissions, modifying file permissions, modifying file permissions. To modify the file permissions, there is a command called chmod command. Using chmod command, we can change file permissions. We are able to understand existing permissions, but how to modify the permission, how to add the permission, how to remove the permission, how to add a permission for the user, how to add the permission for the group, how to add the permission for the others. For that we are going to use one command called chmod command. Using chmod command we can change file permissions. Using chmod we can add and remove permissions. We can add and remove permissions. Now see here, there is a file called ashokit.txt. There is a file called ashokit.txt. Here what permission user is having for this file? Only read and write is available for the user. I want to add execute permission for the user. Can you observe the file permission for ashokit now? Can you tell me who is having what permission on the ashokit.txt file? Who is having what permission on the ashokit.txt file? Can you tell me now? Come on guys. You see ashokit.txt file is available. Who is having what permissions on that file? User is having read write. Group is also having read write. Group is also having read write. Others are having only read. Now I want to add execute permission for the user on the ashokit.txt. I want to add execute permission for the user. Okay, chmod command. Observe this. I'm using chmod. For user I want to add execute. So what is the command I am using? chmod u plus x ashokit.txt. For which file, which permission you want to add, to whom you want to add, you need to specify that in the command. chmod u plus x ashokit.txt. chmod is the command which is used to change file permissions in Linux. Using chmod command we can change file permissions in Linux OS. Using this command we can add the permission and we can remove the permission. U plus X. What is the meaning of U plus X? Adding execute permission for the user on ashokit.txt. Okay? Done. Now let us see here. ls-l. Now can you see for the ashokit.txt user is having the execute permission also. The user is having the execute permission also. RWX. RWX. Can you see that? So what I have done, I have added execute permission for the user. U plus X means add the execute permission for the user. If I give U minus X, guys, if I give U minus X, क्या होगा? Remove. If I give U minus X, what happened? ls-l. Is that permission gone? Is that permission gone? So U plus X means add the execute permission for the user. Right? U minus X means remove the execute permission for the user. Are you able to understand? Add execute permission. Add execute permission for the user. Okay. So what is the meaning of that? chmod U plus X ashokit.txt. So I am adding execute permission for the user on ashokit.txt. Remove execute permission from the user. Remove execute permission for the user. What is the command to remove the execute permission? chmod U minus X file name. That is my file name. Now I want to add execute permission for the group. ls-l ashokit.txt is available. I want to add execute permission for the group. Can you tell me the command now? Can you tell me the command now? Guys, tell me the command now. I want to add execute permission for the group on the ashokit.txt. So what we can do? chmod for the group I want to add execute permission. G plus X ashokit.txt. ls-l. Now can you see group is having a execute permission? Group is having a execute permission. Okay. Add execute permission for the group. Add execute permission for the group. Okay. What we can do? chmod G plus X ashokit.txt. G plus X ashokit.txt. That means for the group I have added execute permission. What is group? That we will understand, guys. Set of users is called as one group. Currently I connected with EC2 user. So tomorrow in my Linux machine multiple users will be available. Multiple user accounts will be available. All the user accounts I will add to one group. Instead of giving a permission to the particular user, I will add all the Linux machine users to one group. I will give the permissions to a group. I will give the permissions to a group. You got my point? You got my point? Okay. Next one. Add write permission for the user. Can you tell me how to add write permission for user? Add write permission for user. How to add the write permission for the user? chmod U plus W. chmod U plus W ashokit.txt. Adding write permission for the user. Remove write permission for the group. Remove write permission for the group. Remove write permission for the group. How to remove the write permission for the group now? chmod G minus W ashokit.txt. Now you understood how to add a permission, how to remove the permission, how to add a permission and how to remove the permission. Very good. Next, let us see here ls-l. Now let us take a file called ashoka.txt. Group is having all three. Now I want to keep only read permission for the group. There are three permissions available for the group. rwx is available for the group. I want to keep only read permission for the group. I want to remove write and execute permission for the group. Are you guys getting my point? I want to remove two permissions at a time. I want to remove two permissions at a time. Remove write permission and execute permission for the group. chmod g minus wx ashokit.txt ls-l. Now can you see only write permission available for the group? Can we remove multiple permissions at a time? Can we add multiple permissions at a time? Okay. Remove read and write permission from the group. Remove write and execute permission from the group. Remove write and execute permission from the permissions for the group. Remove write and execute permissions for the group. What is the command? G minus wx. Okay. Now add write and execute permission for the user. Add the write and execute permission for the user. Add write and execute permission for the user. Now tell me, how can I do this? Now tell me, how can I do this? Add the write and execute permission for the user. So what is the command I need to use? $chmod u plus wx file name. U plus wx file name. So with this, you got the clarity how to work with the file permissions, how to add a permission, how to use the permission. Okay, now add execute permission for others. Add execute permission for others. What we can do? How to add the execute permission for others now? chmod others means O, execute means x, O plus x ashokit.txt. O plus x ashokit.txt. Are you able to follow this? These are the exercises we are doing, guys. I hope now you got the clarity. What is file permission? What sections will be available in the file permission? How to understand the existing permissions? How to change the file permissions? How to change the file permissions? Which command we are using to change the permissions now? What is the command to change the permissions now? chmod command we are going to use it. Plus is used to add the permission, minus is used to remove the permission. Okay. Plus represents adding, plus represents adding, minus represents removing. Plus represents adding, minus represents removing. You got my point? Who can change the permissions of the file? File owner. And root user will be available, file owner will be available to change these permissions. And let us see here, there is one file called players.txt. There is a file called players.txt. Can you see what permissions are available for this file now? permissions are available for this file now? Players.txt. What permissions are available for this file now? For players.txt, what permissions are available for this? Come on. Users are having read write, group is having read write, others are having only read. Okay, now I will do one magic. Guys, observe carefully. chmod, I am executing 777. What I am executing now? 777 I am executing. Am I giving any plus minus? No. I am giving 777. chmod 777 players.txt. Enter.